down there.
And Governor, it's good to see you back here. We miss you already. The people of Minnesota were very bright to bring you back home full time. You know, I just want to echo something that you said, and I think we have the same philosophy on it. Getting into the specific projects that are important to our districts, and we are here to support our constituents in our areas, but we are the Transportation Infrastructure Committee of the United States of America. So we have to have a broader outlook on other projects that don't necessarily always just pertain to our districts. And so I feel it's very short-sighted of some of our colleagues at times to make a statement just, well, the people in my district could care less about a tunnel in New York and New Jersey. Well, that may be very well and true, but it is, I feel it's part of your job to articulate and bring understanding to why it's important to the nation. If that tunnel crumbles, transportation on the eastern seaboard is shut down between Boston and Washington, D.C. And I can remember being in New York with the member from North Carolina, and I'm sure he took the train through that tunnel to get from North Carolina to that meeting. We were in New York. So it has an impact. And so as you said that you are 47th in your return on those monies, but you understand how important it is. And so I wanted to thank you for that. And Mr. Mayor, in your testimony, you discussed some of the investments and changes that have improved the Port of Los Angeles. You also mentioned investments that need to be made at ports, across the nation. I represent the Port of Newark, which is Port of New York and New Jersey, and it is the busiest container port on the eastern seaboard. Could you unpack some of the technologies and investments that need to be made at our major ports across the country, and speak about how Congress can make sure our ports continue to be productive while creating good-paying jobs?
Well, thank you, and thank you for your leadership in Newark and for the nation, because we know even in Los Angeles, Newark's an important port for us and vice versa. We need full utilization of, I think, a fair and equitable framework that takes care of our ports as a system, because they really are tied together. And I support, there's an approach that's been put forward by the American Association of Port Authorities, both of our cities are members of, that looks at funding for each region of the country, but also looking at small emerging harbors. So it's not an either or, it's a both, and for donor and energy transfer ports. As I mentioned before, we collect about $200 million from the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund each year at the Port of LA, and about $3 to $5 million of that is returned. Think about that for a second. $200 million we collect, $3 to $5 million returned. And yet what we're doing there, where together with Long Beach, 40+% of the goods that come into America come through those ports, we're looking at a zero emissions port, because usually communities of color live right by there and they have the worst air quality. People forget one of those huge ships is the equivalent of tens of thousands of cars. So as we look at resilience and climate change, that's a great place to make an impact. And we take a very bold step with Long Beach and LA, saying we'll be the first zero emission port, not in the United States, but in the world. We're going to need some help on the technologies. We're working with private sector, those drayage trucks, everything like that. Second, we're looking at new technologies. It's a great American export, working with GE Capital, for instance, to predict which containers are coming in, match them up with the trucks before they get there. And now we're licensing that to other ports around the world, taking a cut of that, bring it back to America. That's like American know-how. So again, the innovation around ports on logistics, on rail, on-dock rail, new generation of electric locomotives so that we can have zero-emission locomotives for those communities of color and those communities that are around ports. All of those things would be great to see, and a more equitable use. I hear loud and clear what Mr. Westerman said. I'd love to see us take those harbor funds and help the entire system that ties together. We already do that. I'd be willing to share some of that, but we need to get back more than 1 or 2% of what we generate to do the good things for America and to make it work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Gallagher.